The crystal chandeliers of the ballroom glittered above the cruel scene. Julian, holding his new girlfriend close, pointed a champagne flute at Sloane and laughed loudly. "Look at her," he sneered to the crowd. "I dumped her, so she hired a gardener to pretend to be her boyfriend. Did you buy that suit at a thrift store, buddy?" Sloane trembled, her face burning with shame. She tugged on Hayes's arm, desperate to escape. But Hayes did not move. He calmly adjusted his cufflink, stepped forward, and looked Julian dead in the eye. He pulled out his phone and spoke one sentence. "Cancel the contract with Julian's firm immediately. He is not qualified." The room went silent. Julian laughed. "Who do you think you are?" 10 seconds later, his phone rang, and the color drained from his face. Before we see Julian's face drop, let us know where you are watching from in the world in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And if you love seeing arrogant people get what they deserve, hit that like button right now. 24 hours earlier, the atmosphere in Sloane's office had been thick with desperation. The rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the storm inside Sloane's heart. She was pacing back and forth, her hands trembling as she clutched a wedding invitation. Hayes stood by the door, holding a tray of landscape samples. He was wearing his usual work attire, a flannel shirt, durable trousers, and boots stained with fresh earth. He was the company's best landscape designer, quiet, reliable, and entirely unassuming. "I cannot go alone, Hayes," Sloane whispered, her voice cracking. She stopped pacing and looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "Julian is going to be there. He is the best man. If I walk into my sister's wedding alone, after he humiliated me, I will be the laughing stock of the entire family. They already think I am a workaholic spinster." She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure as a boss. "I will pay you," she offered quickly. "I will give you a bonus. I will give you an extra week of paid vacation to spend with your daughter, Juno. Just, please, wear a suit. Hold my hand. Pretend you love me for 6 hours." Hayes looked at her. He saw the exhaustion etched into her beautiful face. He saw a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders and just needed a safe place to land. "I do not want your money, Sloane," Hayes said softly. He set the tray down on her desk. "But I could use the time off with Juno. I will pick you up at 5. Sloane exhaled, slumping into her chair with relief. She had no idea who she had just hired. To Sloane, and to everyone else in the office, Hayes was just a talented gardener and designer who kept to himself. They knew he was a single father who lived simply. What they did not know was that Hayes was actually HV, the elusive billionaire architect whose initials were stamped on the blueprints of the city's tallest skyscrapers. He was the genius behind the skyline. He had walked away from the boardroom politics and the spotlight 3 years ago after his wife passed away, craving a simpler life where he could work with his hands and actually see his daughter grow up. He worked for Sloane because he admired her passion, not because he needed the paycheck. His bank account had more zeros than the company's entire annual revenue. The scene shifted to the present evening. The wedding reception was being held at a sprawling country club estate. When Hayes stepped out of the car, he had traded his flannel for a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He looked devastatingly handsome, exuding a quiet confidence that money could not buy. Sloane took his arm, looking stunning but terrified. As they walked toward the entrance, the whispers began immediately. "Is that Sloane?" a woman whispered loudly behind a fan. "Who is that with her?" "That is the landscape guy," a man chuckled. "The help. I saw him pruning the roses at her office last week." "She brought her employee?" another voice sneered. "How tragic. She must be desperate." Hayes heard every word. His expression remained impassive, a mask of stone. He squeezed Sloane's hand gently, offering her a silent anchor in the rising tide of judgment. He was not worried about their insults. He was measuring the structural integrity of their egos, and he knew exactly which pillar to pull to bring the whole house down. The reception hall was a suffocating cage of expensive perfume and hollow laughter. Hayes navigated the room with the grace of a panther, his arm a steady weight for Sloane to hold on to. She held her head high, but Hayes could feel the tension vibrating through her fingertips. Every pair of eyes felt like a laser, dissecting them, judging them, waiting for the crack in their facade. And then, the predator appeared. Julian stepped into their path, flanked by two sycophantic friends who laughed too hard at everything he said. He held a glass of dark red Cabernet in one hand, swirling it with an affectation of sophistication that he did not possess. "Sloane!" Julian drawled, his eyes raking over her dress with a mixture of desire and disdain. "You look adequate. I see you decided to show your face after all." He turned his gaze to Hayes, his lip curling into a sneer. "And you brought the hired help," Julian laughed, gesturing with his wine glass. "I must say, Sloane, it is a bold choice. Most people bring a +1 to a wedding. You brought a project. Did you have to scrub the dirt from under his fingernails before you left the house?" Sloane stepped forward, her eyes flashing with fury. "Julian, get out of my way." "Relax, darling," Julian smirked, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "I am just trying to give you some friendly advice. You are embarrassing yourself. You are clinging to a nobody while I am ascending to the gods." Julian puffed out his chest, adjusting the lapels of his shiny, overpriced jacket. "You probably have not heard," Julian announced, raising his voice so the nearby guests could hear. "My firm is about to sign an exclusive partnership with HV Designs." Hayes, who had been watching Julian with the detached interest of a scientist observing a lab rat, suddenly focused. His expression did not change, but a glint of steel appeared in his eyes. "HV?" Hayes repeated calmly. His voice was deep, smooth, and commanded attention without shouting. "That is right, Gardner," Julian boasted, turning to Hayes with a pitying smile. "The HV, the most exclusive, mysterious architectural firm in the world. They only work with the elite, and they chose me. The contract is sitting on my desk right now. It is worth $50 million. A little more than you make planting petunias by the hour, I imagine." Julian laughed at his own joke, looking around for validation from his friends. "50 million, Hayes said softly. "That is a lot of money to lose." "Lose?" Julian scoffed. "It is a done deal. I am practically partners with the man, although nobody has ever seen HV in person. They say he is a recluse, probably too busy counting his billions to deal with commoners." Julian took a step closer to Hayes, his eyes narrowing. He did not like the way this tall, quiet man was looking at him. He did not like that Hayes was not shrinking away or looking at the floor. He wanted to see submission. "Nice shoes," Julian commented, looking down at Hayes's polished leather Oxfords. "Did you find those at a garage sale?" Then, with a casual, deliberate flick of his wrist, Julian tilted his glass. It happened in slow motion. The dark red wine cascaded over the rim of the crystal glass and splashed onto Hayes's pristine shoe. The liquid dripped down to the white marble floor, creating a stark, ugly puddle. "Oops," Julian said, his voice dripping with insincere apology. "My hand slipped. But honestly, you are probably used to walking in mud and manure, right? A little wine might actually be an improvement." Sloane gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Then, her shock turned to rage. She raised her hand, ready to slap the smirk right off Julian's face. But Hayes caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but firm. He stopped her hand in midair. "Don't," Hayes murmured to her. "He is not worth the energy." Hayes slowly reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief. He bent down on one knee. For a second, Julian looked triumphant, thinking Hayes was bowing to him. But Hayes simply wiped the wine from his shoe with methodical, calm strokes. He stood back up, folding the ruined handkerchief and placing it on a passing waiter's tray. He looked at Julian. There was no anger in his face. There was only a terrifying, absolute calm. It was the look of a man who held a royal flush, while his opponent was betting everything on a pair of twos. "You should enjoy that wine, Julian," Hayes said. "It might be the last expensive thing you taste for a very long time." This guy Julian is the absolute worst. He thinks money gives him the right to treat people like trash. He is bragging about a $50 million deal with HV. Wait a minute. Does he even know who he is talking to? The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. He is literally insulting the man who holds his future in his hands. Karma is coming, and it is coming fast. Do not blink, because Julian is about to learn a very painful lesson. Julian was not finished. The silence from Hayes, far from acting as a deterrent, only emboldened him. He interpreted the lack of shouting as weakness. He turned his back on Hayes, dismissing him entirely, and focused his venom on Sloane. Honestly, Sloane, Julian sighed, shaking his head with mock disappointment. I almost feel sorry for you. I suppose this is the best you can do now. A woman of your age with your baggage. You have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. It makes sense that you would settle for a man who plays in the dirt for a living. You always did have low standards. Sloane flinched as if she had been slapped. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to defend Hayes, but the words caught in her throat. The humiliation was a heavy blanket, suffocating her. That was the moment the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hayes did not shout. He did not shove Julian. He simply stepped forward, placing himself physically between Sloane and her tormentor. He loomed over Julian, his broad shoulders blocking out the light, his presence suddenly suffocating. That is enough, Hayes said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a resonance that cut through the chatter of the ballroom. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed instantly. Julian blinked, looking up at Hayes with a mixture of confusion and amusement. Excuse me? Did the help just speak? Hayes ignored the insult. He looked Julian straight in the eye, his gaze piercing. You mentioned earlier that you are signing a contract with HV Designs. You said you are practically partners. Julian scoffed, swirling his wine again. That is right. Not that you would understand the complexity of such a deal. It is way above your pay grade. Have you met him? Hayes asked. The question was sharp, precise. Have you ever sat across a table from HV and looked him in the eye? Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second, his eyes darting to the crowd that had gathered around them. He could not admit he was lying in front of an audience. Of course I have, Julian lied smoothly, puffing out his chest. We had dinner last week. Great guy. He respects me. He told me I am the future of this industry. He would not give the time of day to a nobody like you. Hayes nodded slowly. A small, cold smile touched the corners of his lips. It was a terrifying smile. Is that so? Hayes said. Well, that is strange, because I do not recall having dinner with you. Julian frowned. What are you talking about? Hayes reached into his tuxedo pocket and retrieved his phone. He did not look at it as he unlocked it. His eyes remained locked on Julian's face. He tapped a single contact and pressed the speaker button. The phone rang once. Yes, Mr. Hayes? A crisp, professional female voice filled the silent space between them. It was Sarah, his executive assistant. Sarah, Hayes said, his voice devoid of emotion. I am currently looking at the file for the Sterling Group merger, the one handled by a Mr. Julian. Yes, sir, Sarah replied instantly. The contracts are prepared and awaiting your final signature on Monday morning. It is a $50 million agreement. Julian's face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the phone in Hayes's hand as if it were a bomb. Kill it, Hayes ordered. Sir? Sarah asked, sounding surprised. Cancel the deal, Hayes said, enunciating every word clearly. Terminate all negotiations with the Sterling Group immediately, and blacklist Julian from any future projects with HV Designs or any of our subsidiaries. He is not to step foot on any property I own. Understood, sir, Sarah said efficiently. I am sending the termination notice to his board of directors right now. Is there anything else? No, thank you, Sarah. Hayes tapped the screen, ending the call. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Julian stared at Hayes, his brain struggling to process what had just happened. He let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Nice trick," Julian stammered, looking around at the crowd. "Very funny. You got a friend to call you and pretend? You think I believe a gardener is HV? You are pathetic." Hayes did not answer. He just waited. He counted down in his head. 3, 2, 1. A loud, jarring ringtone shattered the silence. It was Julian's phone. Julian jumped. He reached into his pocket with trembling hands. He looked at the screen. The caller ID displayed, "The Big Boss." He swallowed hard. He looked at Hayes, terror finally dawning in his eyes. He answered the phone, bringing it slowly to his ear. Hello? Sir? The voice on the other end was so loud that everyone standing nearby could hear it clearly. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. "You idiot!" the boss roared. "What did you do?" "I just got an email from HV Design's headquarters. They pulled the contract. They pulled everything. $50 million, gone in seconds. They said you are personally responsible." "Sir, Julian squeaked, sweat pouring down his forehead. "I think there is a mistake." "The only mistake was hiring you," the boss screamed. "Do not bother coming back to the office. You are fired. You hear me? You are done in this town. Fired." The line went dead. Julian lowered the phone slowly. His hand was shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He looked up at Hayes, his face a mask of pure shock and devastation. The arrogance was gone. The sneer was gone. All that was left was a small, broken man standing in a puddle of wine. The phone slipped from Julian's nerveless fingers and hit the carpet with a dull thud. He did not even look down. He could not tear his eyes away from the man standing before him. The pieces of the puzzle were slamming together in his mind, forming a picture that made him sick to his stomach. The initials, HV. The sudden cancellation. The quiet authority. The way this man wore a tuxedo as if he had been born in one. "You," Julian wheezed, his voice barely a whisper. "You are him. You are Hayes Vance." The crowd gasped. The name rippled through the room like a shockwave. Hayes Vance was a legend, a ghost story in the business world. He was the architect who had designed the city's opera house, the skyline's crown jewel tower, and then vanished into thin air 3 years ago. Hayes reached up and adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture of casual elegance that was more intimidating than a raised fist. "I am," Hayes replied. His voice was cool, level, and stripped of any pretense. "I design gardens now, that is true. I find peace in the soil. It is honest work." He took a step closer to Julian, lowering his voice so that only Julian and Sloane could hear the steel beneath the velvet. "But make no mistake, Julian. I may dig in the dirt during the day, but I still own the ground you walk on. And I decide who gets to enter my garden. You?" Hayes looked Julian up and down, his gaze lingering on the man's terrified, sweating face. "You are nothing but a weed, and I just pulled you out." Julian crumbled. He looked around for support, for his friends, for anyone to tell him this was a nightmare. But his friends had vanished, melting into the crowd to distance themselves from the social radioactive fallout. He was utterly alone. Sloane stood frozen, her eyes wide as saucers. She looked at Hayes as if seeing him for the very first time. This was the man she had seen fixing the sprinkler system in the rain last week. This was the man who ate ham sandwiches in the break room and talked about his daughter's ballet recitals. She had hired him because she thought he was safe, simple, and attainable. She realized now that she had been standing next to a king disguised as a peasant. "Hayes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it true? You are a billionaire?" Hayes turned to her. The cold, hard mask he had worn for Julian instantly melted away. His eyes softened, crinkling at the corners with the warmth she recognized. He was no longer the titan of industry. He was just Hayes. "I am just a dad, Sloane," he said gently. "I am just a guy who wanted to raise his daughter without paparazzi chasing her to school. I wanted a life that was real. Working for you. That was the most real thing I have done in years. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid. But right now, Hayes continued, checking his watch, I am a dad who is late for a very important dinner date. Sloane blinked, confused. Dinner date? But the reception? Hayes looked around the ballroom. He looked at the superficial crowd, the spilled wine, and the broken man whimpering on the floor. This is not a party, Sloane. This is a shark tank. And I think we have had enough of sharks for one night. He smiled, a boyish, mischievous grin that made Sloane's heart do a somersault in her chest. Juno is at home with the babysitter, and I promised her we would bring pizza, large pepperoni with extra cheese. And frankly, I would rather share a greasy slice on the couch with you than drink another glass of this sour champagne. He offered her his arm, not as an employee, and not as a fake boyfriend, but as an equal. What do you say, boss? Are you ready to get out of here? Sloane looked at Julian, who was currently being escorted out by the very security guards he had tried to sic on Hayes earlier. Then she looked at Hayes. For the first time all night, she smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile of freedom. Yes, Sloane said. Get me out of here, and I am buying the pizza. Deal, Hayes laughed. Together, they turned their backs on the glitter and the gold. They walked out of the ballroom, leaving the whispers and the shock behind them, stepping out into the cool night air where the only thing that mattered was the truth, and the promise of a really good slice of pizza. The luxury sedan glided down the highway, putting miles between them and the toxic atmosphere of the wedding. The silence inside the car was not heavy. It was comfortable, like the quiet after a summer storm. Sloane watched the city lights blur past the window. She turned to look at Hayes. He was driving with one hand on the wheel, his other arm resting on the center console. He had loosened his tie, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked relaxed, stripped of the armor he had worn to destroy Julian. So, Sloane said softly, breaking the silence. HV Designs. You own the building our office is in, don't you? Hayes glanced at her, a sheepish smile playing on his lips. Technically, yes. I bought it last year. I like the landscaping. Sloane laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. Why hide it, Hayes? You could have walked in there and bought the whole company. You could have been the CEO. Why spend your days pruning roses and hauling mulch? Hayes's expression turned serious. He kept his eyes on the road, his voice low and reflective. After my wife passed away, the world became very loud. Everyone wanted something. Everyone looked at me and saw a bank account, not a human being. I did not want Juno to grow up in that bubble. I wanted her to know the value of hard work. I wanted to come home with dirt on my hands and feel like I actually earned my sleep. He paused, glancing at Sloane again. And I wanted to find people who liked me for me. Not for the legacy, not for the buildings, just for the guy who likes gardening. Sloane felt a lump form in her throat. She reached across the console and covered his hand with hers. Well, she whispered, for the record, the guy who likes gardening is my favorite person I have ever met. And he was pretty incredible back there. Hayes turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. The connection sent a jolt of electricity through them both. Does this mean I am fired? Hayes teased. I did cause a scene at your sister's wedding. Oh, absolutely not, Sloane replied, a playful spark returning to her eyes. You are not getting out of that landscaping contract. You have petunias to plant on Monday. But, she squeezed his hand, I think I might need to discuss a promotion. The position of fake boyfriend has been terminated. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Is that so? And is there a vacancy for a real boyfriend? I think the interview is happening right now, Sloane smiled. And if you bring good pizza, you are hired. Hayes laughed, the sound filling the car with warmth. Pepperoni and extra cheese coming right up. They drove on into the night, leaving the pretenses and the lies behind them. They were just a man and a woman, heading home to a little girl and a box of pizza, ready to start something real. Mic drop! Did you see Julian's face? That was the most satisfying moment I have ever seen. Hayes did not need to shout or throw a punch. He just made one phone call and absolutely destroyed the bully. It just proves that silence is truly powerful when you hold all the cards. Who wants a gardener like Hayes now? I know I do. If you loved this revenge story, drop a heart in the comments below. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more stories. See you next time.